Please be seated. I want to start by wishing everyone a Gemar Chatima Tova. May you all be inscribed in the book of life for the year to come. And hopefully those who are fasting are having an easy fast, although it's still early. There's a certain prayer that I recite at most funerals. I'm not sure if I'm doing it to help comfort myself or an attempt to comfort the families and friends at the funeral, but I find it helpful. The words of the prayer are, we are all destined to die. We share it with all who ever lived, with all who ever will be. Cry for the dead, hide not your grief, do not restrain your mourning, but remember that continued sorrow is worse than death. When the dead are at rest, let their memory be a source of peace, and be consoled when the soul departs. And it ends with, the good things in life last for a short time, but a good reputation endures forever. We will all eventually die. We share that with all who ever lived and all who will ever be. It is true that we all die, but not all deaths are the same. If we're lucky, we live a long, fulfilled life, replete with accomplishments and joy. In the ideal world, we would reach a ripe old age, lay down to go to sleep one night, and never wake up. Some deaths hit home more than others. Perhaps because of their senselessness, maybe because of their cruelty. Some are complete surprises. Others come after a prolonged and painful illness. The stories of some deaths hit close to home because we can somehow relate to them. Whatever the reason for death, old age, illness, murder, accidents, our hope is that our life will have had some meaning to our family, to our friends, to the world at large. This morning, I want to share a story about a senseless death that hit home for me, but that ended up having great meaning, especially, I think, for us as we contemplate the notion of forgiveness on Yom Kippur. Imagine for a second, as I might myself imagine, that you're visiting your 20-something son in a far-off city. You decide one night to go out for a beer at a local pub or bar. Maybe catch the football game or a hockey game. After the game, you step outside together with your son, and out of nowhere, another patron hauls off and punches your son in the head, knocking him to the ground unconscious. This very scenario happened to David Hodgkinson in 2011. He was with his 28-year-old son, James. James was knocked to the ground by a stranger's punch to the head. He would never resume consciousness, and he died 9 days later in the hospital. The young man who punched James is named Jacob Dunn. He pled guilty to assault and served just 14 months for manslaughter. James's parents, David and Joan, were left not only with unanswered questions about why their son was attacked, but with the dissatisfaction that justice was not really served. But that's not the end of the story. As I said before, the thing I think we hope for most in the world is that somehow our life, even after death, has meaning. Our hope that even a senseless death like this can ultimately serve to help others. The story about James Hodgkinson has been made into a play, now running in London and on Broadway. It's called Punch. It follows the journey of the parents, David and Joan, and their eventual face-to-face encounter with their son's murderer through a program known as restorative justice. You may be familiar with the idea of restorative justice. I know I've had a very complicated relationship with restorative justice. The concept seems simple on paper. A trained facilitator works at trying to bring together victims and perpetrators to confront one another, to seek answers to unanswered questions, and ultimately forgiveness. Van Jones had a series about restorative justice on CNN called The Redemption Project. The play, Punch, focuses on the emotional moment when David and Joan come face to face with Jacob. Imagine what it must have been like for both sides as they prepared themselves emotionally for the moment. David and Joan to try and get answers to why their son died, to share with the perpetrator the pain he caused, and ultimately to give themselves the opportunity to forgive him. Not for him, but for them. To be able to finally move on from the tragedy. Imagine what it must have been like for Jacob, living with the guilt of killing another human being, knowing he was about to face the parents of his victim. According to the critics and others who've seen the play, the scene of the encounter is difficult, raw, emotional, painful. In real life, David and Joan start up a relationship with Jacob, and that leads to the play being written and produced. David and Joan get some answers to their questions. Jacob got the forgiveness he may never have thought possible. James should never have died so senselessly. His death was tragic. But should it ever remain meaningless? The course of Jacob's life, headed in a spiral in the wrong direction, is now headed in a positive one, with a wife, college degree, a job as a public speaker and podcaster, The story is not easy to hear or watch. Many of us would not be able to find the strength to meet with a violent criminal who caused us horrific pain. Many of us are saying right now to ourselves that Jacob doesn't deserve to have all those things that James will never have. But that's not how David and Joan would have wanted their son's life to be remembered. If not for this restorative justice, David and Joan said they would still be mired in their bitterness and anger. Forgiveness is not easy. It's tough. It asks so much of us. It doesn't mean forgetting or condoning. It's not meant to allow the other person off the hook. Even our own tradition demands it of us. We're here today asking God for forgiveness for our own transgressions. How can we ask it of God if we are not willing to offer forgiveness ourselves? We're supposed to spend the last month and certainly the last 10 days asking forgiveness from our loved ones, from our friends, from our neighbors and coworkers. How can we ask them for forgiveness if we're not willing to give it? Maimonides, one of the great medieval commentators, defines our tradition's notion of restorative justice when he describes the process of asking for forgiveness to those we have harmed in Hilchot Tshuva, the laws of repentance. He writes, "Neither repentance nor the Day of Atonement atone for any sins committed, except those committed between man and God. Sins between people, for instance, one who injures his neighbor or curses his neighbor or plunders him or offends him in like manners, is never absolved unless he makes restitution of what he owes and begs the forgiveness of his neighbor. And although he makes restitution of the monetary debt, he is obliged to pacify him and to beg his forgiveness, even if he offended his neighbor only in words. He's obliged to appease him and implore him until he is forgiven by him. If his neighbor refuses to forgive, he should bring a group of 3 friends with him to ask again for that forgiveness. If he still refuses to forgive him, he should bring a second, even a third group. And then, if he remains obstinate, he may move on. For after 3 times, then the sin rests upon him who refuses to forgive." It may take time. It may take several attempts. But ultimately, our tradition upholds both our obligation to ask for forgiveness and our obligation to offer forgiveness. James' death, awful as it was, doesn't have to be the end of the story. His memory can endure as an inspiration for others. His story and life and example can serve to help others, and his parents can see the good that can come from the tragic events. The story of James Hodgkinson and the fateful punch should give us pause about what is perhaps holding us back from offering forgiveness. Gemar Chatima Tova. We're going to continue now with the Yizkor service.